Hello, everyone. A warm welcome from Nova Scotia. We're so pleased you can join us today for our webinar on helping internationally educated professionals, IEPs, achieve success in a post-COVID world. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional Mi'kmaq territory, and we're grateful for the peace and friendship treaties. At ISANS, as we work to settle newcomers to Nova Scotia, we honor and respect the Indigenous people of this land. Today, we're going to be talking about how we support internationally educated professionals in Nova Scotia. We've been engaged in this work for close to 2 decades, and we've established some practices that we think can be replicated or adapted to your contexts. Our work with IEPs is multifold. We have programs that focus on professional communications, job search strategies, and competency assessments for many different barriers to employment. I'm here today with 4 of my colleagues, Tanya Matthews, Andrea Taylor, Sarah Sampra, and Cassidy Scholl. We will primarily be talking about our programs, but we're happy to answer questions related to the whole process. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. The chat box is enabled. However, we would prefer that you ask your questions in the Q&A box. We'll be answering all of those questions at the end of the presentation. Now, I'd like to hand you over to our first presenter, Cassidy Scholl. Cassidy, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Carol. And hi, everyone. Glad to be here. To begin for today, I'm going to be starting to talk a little bit about our employment and bridging counseling services that we offer. As one of the supervisors on the employment and bridging team at ISANS, I'll be really happy to talk a little bit about what employment counseling is all about, who we provide service to, and share a little bit about our approach and how it's changed since the days of COVID. So first of all, we do provide one-on-one customized support for any clients that are looking to gain support in trying to find work. And we also do support professionals who are in regulated professions. This is one of our areas of specialty at ISANS. And when we say regulated professions, these include professions that might require a license in order to work in that field. So we will see a number of examples throughout the presentation and talk more about that today. But just to kind of give an overview of the clientele we serve, employment counselors are lucky because it's one of the services where we can actually provide assistance to all different immigration categories. While not every single program at ISANS makes this possible, but for employment counseling, we can serve everyone from permanent residents in Canada to refugees and citizens born outside of Canada. We also serve temporary foreign workers who have open work permits and dependents. We're able to serve international students and graduates as well as their dependents. And we're able to work with those who were selected through the Atlantic Immigration Program, which was previously a pilot program and recently came into change just this year. So we're able to work with nominees selected through that program as well as their dependents. So again, we're able to serve quite a wide range of immigration categories through our employment support. Now, when we're talking about our employment counseling, I just want to give a little bit of an overview again of what we do, and then I'll talk a little bit more about our approach to employment counseling. So we always think of our employment counseling as meeting our clients where they are at the time that they come to us. And this means all of our clients have a very wide range of experience, whether they were professionals in their former country, or if they had no formal education or extensive formal education. We really meet the clients where they are and try to assess their existing skills and experience, and also try to help them in terms of recognizing how that particular experience might be able to apply in the current labor market. Sometimes this means trying to assess even informal or volunteer work and how that may apply. And again, in other cases, it might be for those in a regulated profession, how that work might translate and what kind of steps they might need to take in order to work in Canada. Once we're able to do this, we work very closely with the Skills for Success profiles. And I know we'll touch on this quite a bit later in the presentation, but the skills for success are basically the identified skills that are most necessary to succeed in work and life in Canada. So we work closely with those skills to develop what we call a return to work action plan. And this plan we like to think of as almost a map or some sense of guidance of what exact steps our clients will need to take to reach both their short and long-term goals, for instance. Once we're able to do that, we can refer clients to additional programs or services at ISANS, and we also continue to meet with them one-on-one on an ongoing basis to provide continuous support. Now, a little bit more about our approach, and particularly because our presentation talks about a post-COVID world, a little bit more about how we've actually been doing this, particularly over the last couple of years. So our approach is very much customized and adaptable to the needs of our clients. And this means serving those who may not have even arrived in Canada just yet. So we do serve pre-arrival clients as well as clients who have already landed and made a home here in Nova Scotia. We're able to offer blended formats. So sometimes we serve clients on site when circumstances allow for that, meaning live or face-to-face. Sometimes we serve them online, and in many cases, we're able to offer service in blended formats, meaning if we're conducting a workshop, some may come on site when possible, and others might join from the comfort of their homes, especially again, if we may have clients arriving, joining from their home countries or other destinations, or even within rural areas around Nova Scotia. We also adapt based on clients' preferences. So in the case that maybe one of our clients might be working full-time, we can certainly offer flexible hours or evening appointments or a Zoom call opposed to, for example, a face-to-face meeting. So again, very much an adaptable approach based on what the client's needs are at the time. We also make sure to be very process-oriented in the sense that, again, we look at employment as a journey, and there are several steps along the way. So we really help to kind of create that map that supports our clients and guides them in terms of what steps they want to take in order to reach their particular goals. All of our counseling is with the idea of a trauma-informed approach always in mind, meaning we do serve clients who come from a wide range of circumstances, and we are always trying to be mindful of those circumstances and approach our counseling in a way that accounts for some of these life experiences our clients may have had. And finally, our approach is very much grounded in partnerships, whether that means between different departments or with employers and other community partners in Nova Scotia that can help us to meet our clients' needs. Now, just to kind of give you a visual of what this really looks like when a client meets with an employment counselor one-on-one, as I said, I like to think of it as almost a map we provide to help guide the clients, and it takes a few different steps along the way. So the first step is to start with some intake, meaning we collect information and get this information to inform the employment counselor about this particular client's background. And then we would do a needs assessment where we would cover that return to work action plan that I mentioned. This would involve having discussions about what kind of challenges or barriers the client may be facing at that time. Perhaps it might be language, it may be other challenges. And if they are in a regulated profession, their return to work action plan would include a lot of information about what steps they would need to take in order to become licensed as a professional. And again, we'll talk about this much more throughout the session today. Once we've had the chance to meet with the client, assess their needs, give some more information, we would start to refer those clients to additional programs and services both within ISANS as well as perhaps connecting them within the larger community to other resources or perhaps employers that might be of use to them. We also do provide thorough job development. So this means helping them prepare documents in order to work. So a resume, a cover letter. We work very closely with them to support them through that process. We also provide in-depth interview preparation, whether through our own staff or through our coordinators who would match them with subject matter experts in their field. And finally, once ready and prepared, we also do job development and follow-up, meaning we often reach out to employers who might be of assistance to them, begin to connect them, and of course, follow up on an ongoing basis to ensure that our clients' needs are met and that they are able to successfully find meaningful work in their field. So again, that's an overview, and we'll talk a little bit more about each of these components throughout the presentation. But for now, I will turn it over to Tanya Matthews, my colleague, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of our occupation-specific bridging programs at ISANS.
Thank you, Cassidy. Hello, everybody, and a special shout out. I see there is a colleague of ours, ex-colleague of ours, Jacinta, in attendee group. So hello from Nova Scotia. I'm Tanya Matthews. I supervise pre-employment and bridging programs. So I work very closely with all the coordinators and bridging programs that we want to specifically talk to you today about are the programs that Cassidy mentioned, targets and works closely with those clients, job seekers who require some type of a license or permit to practice in Canada. Our bridging programs are rooted, and we have been delivering bridging programs for a number of different occupations for quite a few years. But they're mostly rooted out of the different challenges that these professionals, international educated professionals, face. Most commonly, we hear the stories of clients, even before they arrive to Canada, having a really hard time figuring out what is the right and appropriate pathway for them to get licensed, and how quickly they can obtain such license, and how quickly they can start and practice in Canada. The other challenge is definitely supports and idea and orientation too, and just understanding how the examination process is conducted in Canada. And we definitely address those challenges through some of our programs. I'll be able to talk to you more about. And culture. We know that for any newcomer and immigrant dealing with culture and various competencies in their specific profession can be a challenge as well. Communication. This is some of my colleagues will talk more about communication skills and competency upskilling in this area. And we all know that number of different licensing processes has very strict requirements when it comes to the English language level competency that somebody has to be or reach to be able to obtain the license. We know that going through the pathways is also quite expensive. Some of those certificates, some of those exams cost around $1,000, if not more. And if you add to that the fact that not all examination is offered in the place of residence, that many of these professionals have to travel all over the Canada to attend tests and exams and so on, as well as if they unfortunately don't pass on the first try, having to wait for another round of certification and so on. So financial burdens are quite significant. And being a newcomer in a new country, in a new community, when it comes to developing professional networks, social networks, and others is always a challenge, but in particular, talking about professional networks. Another challenge that international educated professionals face is also figuring out if by some reason they're not successful, what would be meaningful alternative career options, or what are some type of jobs they could be doing while pursuing their licensure. So looking at all of these challenges, we are able to provide a number of different bridging programs. We work with medical graduates, pharmacists, dentists, nurses, and finance professionals. And we also offer competency assessment programs, and I'll talk more about the difference between the two. We work with engineers and architects, early childhood educators, long-term care aides or CCAs, accountants, trades, carpenters, and professional drivers. So that would be sort of a menu of our bridging programs currently very active within ISANS in serving majority of this population. And all of these require some type of a license or permit to practice in Nova Scotia. In terms of bridging programs, lots of different components of the bridging programs are delivered by subject matter experts. We work very closely, as Cassidy mentioned, with a number of different partners in the community and internally. We tend to work in terms of cohorts, and the programming weeks could last anywhere from 10 to 18 weeks. For example, our nursing program offers 18-week foundations where they cover quite a range of topics to help nurses prepare and understand their role and their occupation in Nova Scotia. Study groups which tackle a number of different field-specific topics, and they mostly function from some type of a queue bank. And it's actually one of my favorite parts of the programs, because when you see the collaboration between these international educated professionals and supporting each other and trying to share their knowledge and skill and experience, it's really actually one of the most beautiful things to see when they're in their study groups, in their cohorts. As I mentioned, exam preparation is quite strong, and we actually have to say that when we look in terms of passing rate, our clients are doing pretty well passing on the first go. We tend to have a significantly higher exam passing rate than the national average, that we are something really proud of. So our clients always tell us that they definitely felt very prepared to tackle the exam. And the mock objective structured clinical examinations is probably one of the hardest ones to tackle and prepare for, because it involves simulated patients. It involves quite a range of different situations and scenarios. And this is the type of exam that is quite costly. It's quite an achievement to actually be able to pass and complete the mock OSCE. As we mentioned, that we have not been able to do this without the partners that we have developed. And especially you'll hear from Andrea and Sarah and the communication team, which supports further learning for our clients. Job search strategy skills, which are also rooted in skills for success, so that we can say that the clients are job ready upon completion of this part of the training. And then the supervised work experience, or the competency assessment. Another little success when it comes to competency assessments is the fact that employers tend to retain those clients who are in the placement, because they can see the skill and the level of education that they bring to their teams, and are happy to offer them permanent full-time employment. And just quick mention of the multi-stakeholder working groups. Multi-stakeholder working groups is a model that's quite unique to Nova Scotia. I think this year we are celebrating 10 or 11 years of this model. There is all types of different contributors to the groups and group meetings, as you can see from the list. Anybody from regulatory bodies and from representatives of different associations or educational institutions, NGOs, employers, of course, ISANS representatives, and so on. These groups are strong advocates on behalf of IEPs, especially when it comes to licensure pathway, trying to make it fair, trying to make it accessible, trying to make it timely, because all of these IEPs are also running against the time, so that they are not considered out of practice. And when you consider that many of these exams are only maybe offered once a year, time actually becomes quite a significant challenge to tackle as well. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Taylor. I'm one of the language counselors here at ISANS. Just listening to my colleagues always inspires me, so I'm really enjoying this so far. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and listening to some of the work that we're doing with ISANS. As a language counselor, we work with language learners to help raise awareness of their strengths and also needs, along with appropriate strategies, which will hopefully work to better meet the learner's goals. And here at ISANS, we're lucky to have myself as a higher level language counselor. We also have my colleague Kate works with lower level language learners. And this is a service available to clients who need that support. Maybe they're looking for information to have their questions answered and any kind of guidance around their learning goals. So we feel that this service is critical to help our clients navigate language learning effectively and to integrate better and more quickly into the community, and also, of course, into the workplace, as we're more talking about today. This guidance has to be realistic, and we have to make sure expectations that we set for our clients are realistic and that they are able to choose appropriate programs that will help meet their needs. Sometimes clients are overwhelmed by the number of different programs that are offered at ISANS. And again, this can be a way for us to guide that conversation, to give options, and to help people make informed decisions. So in language counseling, we would start off by assessing what the learning needs are, maybe talking about some challenging skills that clients have. This could be listening, speaking, reading, writing. Sometimes conversations around very specific skills like pronunciation or listening to different styles of speaking. We like to also, in a counseling session, explore those different options for studying specific skills or topics appropriate to the client's requests or needs or how they're feeling. In a meeting, I would definitely want to outline some details of these language programs, ask lots of questions, and some of my favorite sessions are when clients ask tons of questions, because that lets me know that we're having a meaningful exchange. We want to also prepare an accurate timeline. Often clients want to do everything all at once and then just sort of fast track. And sometimes that's fairly realistic, but as we were talking about, we want to manage those expectations. And if we can draw out a learning plan into an appropriate timeline, this will ensure more success because we're focusing on one thing at a time. As we build on one skill, we can then move on to the next step. And we would call that a learning plan. So like everyone else, I'm sure there's been a lot of changes to programs. One of the things that was kind of alarming at first was just adapting quickly, very quickly, like within a few days, to delivering our services online. My colleagues all know me as competent, but perhaps not digitally, literate competent. So that was something I personally struggled with at the beginning, was switching what I was used to, which is an on-site service, to online. However, this allowed me to be much more flexible with my timing. We can have early morning appointments. Cassidy mentioned evening options. Pre-COVID, I wasn't always able to do that, because of my family commitments in my life situation. So now I'm able to meet with clients outside of typical working hours. And I found that that's very welcome. And people are very grateful that we can do that. And it helps people to access the service much more easily. Less scheduling and childcare issues for our clients for arranging these appointments as well. And also, again, to maintain that quality of service, which was my biggest concern at the onset of COVID-19, but here we are almost 2 years later, and I feel stronger in this service every day. So that was a positive thing that we can look at the silver lining, I guess. So I think you can probably hear a bit of enthusiasm in my voice about language counseling and how it works, but some of the biggest highlights here for me are to help clients develop individual learning plans and also to adapt those plans, sometimes very quickly based on successes of employment or changes in a schedule. We're able to, sometimes meeting a client one day might be very different if I meet them in a month, and that's okay. And we encourage people to always reach out if they do need to make any changes to a learning plan that we've discussed. It's not written in stone. This is a flexible, fluid arrangement that we have. I love working one-to-one with clients. I'm lucky to do small groups sometimes too, in family units if that's appropriate. And making connections with other teams, not just across ISANS, but with external service providers across Nova Scotia, actually. We have contacts, from one end of this province to the other. And I'm always grateful when we can meet online or chat by phone, or if there's a specific issue with a client. I feel wonderful when someone reaches out to us to ask for guidance or advice. And this makes a stronger client-centered approach. And we can be creative. One plan doesn't fit everybody, right? Like one size fits all, never the case. So we have to be creative with these different types of programs and make sure that when we're setting out a plan that it's actually something that's feasible and will work for the client. So just touching again on collaboration, assisting program coordinators with the screening of potential participants. This is something that we focus a lot on, just to make sure again that the clients are on the right contact list for different programs, and that we're reaching out at an appropriate time, that we're not putting pressure on a client by overlapping programs. So I work very closely with our program coordinators, promoting programs to new clients and also existing clients. I'm very lucky to be invited to language classrooms from time to time to promote not just language counseling, but ISANS programs as a whole. And then clarifying and just discussing those program details. What is a program all about? How long will it take? What are the responsibilities of the participant or client within the program? What does a timeline look like? If there's any interruptions, is there flexibility for the client to skip a part and join at a later time? And just overall the expectations, what we expect from clients, and very important, what clients expect from us, and making sure that that's all part of that discussion so we all move ahead knowledgeably. Great, and I'm just going to hand things over to Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. So my name is Sarah Sampra, and I'm going to be talking to you about the communications courses. Currently, I am a team lead with Language Services, so I'm helping to oversee the running of these courses, but I have been involved in the development of the curriculum as well. So a unique perspective, I think. The two stages that we're going to talk about, we'll share a little bit about, is the development and the implementation of the communications courses. And we're going to focus a little bit more on the development aspect, mainly because we found that when we take a lot of time to develop our courses well, then the implementation goes quite smooth. For our development approach, we always recommend that we teach language in the context of real-world tasks. This may seem normal, but it isn't the way every language class runs. And so it's definitely the way that we ensure our language programs run. And we do this based on our language framework, which is the Canadian Language Benchmarks, as well as the Skills for Success, which Cassidy was talking about earlier, and which I'm going to touch a little bit more on later. And based on subject matter expert feedback. So we invite input from our subject matter experts to make sure that the language context we're teaching in is appropriate to our learners. Focusing on these recommended practices, our first recommended practice is to reference the Skills for Success model. And so the Skills for Success model has 9 skills. And usually for all of the programs that we do, there is a specific profile for each of the professions. And so we reference that, we read it through it carefully. And, you know, since our courses are communication based and we're focusing on language improvement, we do take quite a thorough look at the reading, writing, and communication essential skills. However, we consider all the other skills as well, because although those skills are not technically language skills, there is a lot of very valuable language and real world tasks involved in them. A good example from the engineers course is problem solving. Engineers are required to recognize when there are skill shortages within their team projects, alert management, and discuss funding and recruit people to be available. So we would be able to look at that from a task perspective and say, okay, well, it's not just about problem solving, it's about being able to discuss things competently and confidently with management to be able to present what is needed in a logical way and with effective language. And then once we do that, we're able to kind of take a step back and group things together into a way that seems most logical and necessary to the needs of that particular profession. And then we identify what can be realistically taught and what require coping strategies. And what we mean by that is that obviously all of our courses are targeted for a specific language level. But some of the tasks that are required in the Skills for Success model and some of the tasks that will be required of them in their daily professional lives are skills that may be a little bit more challenging than their language level deems. So we look at coping strategies for how they can effectively interact with those skills in that real world context in a way that meets their language abilities where they are. So in addition to referencing the Skills for Success, we also recommend involving external partners. So those external partners, we call them our SMEs or our subject matter experts. They may be governing or licensing bodies, professional associations, apprenticeship agencies, those multi-stakeholder working groups we were talking about earlier. We love to bring their input in as well. Employment counselors, sector councils, community colleges, employers themselves. Of course, we did for nurses. We actually involved local Nova Scotia nurses to provide input and review the course content. So whoever is a really valuable eye is somebody that we often request their input on. And sometimes I've included non-sector partners. The Nova Scotia Rainbow Action Project has actually given us some very valuable input on inclusive language. So sometimes those particular external partners, although they're external to the profession that we're targeting, are essential for the language that we are teaching. And with those subject matter experts, we always like to request their input, and we always request it 2 times, usually once at the beginning, because often there's a lot of, we'll develop our plan, but there may be things that we haven't accounted for that they say, well, actually, we really need this. So they help us to guide and to select our content, or if there's too much, they can help us to whittle it down to what's most important. And then throughout the process, we often have our subject matter experts review our curriculum to make sure that it is valid, relevant, and accurate to the profession. And we do that with targeted questions, basically knowing what you know about the sector. Have we included anything that should be omitted? Have we omitted anything that should be included? Are all of the terms and contexts really reflective of the sector? And that's something we get a lot of feedback on, because there's often specific terminology that we're not always aware of because we're not involved in the sector. Does anything require rewording, or are there any other changes you suggest? So it's nice and open to get their true and authentic feedback, but also helps us to target exactly what we're looking for. And then once we receive their feedback, we get to evaluate it. And our philosophy is we apply whatever we can. If they have taken the time to review it, then I think we need to take the time to apply it. And if, unfortunately, there are just things that we're unable to apply because they go outside the scope of the course, we also try and identify other supports that would be available to meet some of those needs, especially if there's other language that's required, but maybe in some other non-profession specific EAL courses that we offer. A good example of involving our subject matter experts is Engineers Nova Scotia. They have actually thoroughly reviewed our communication skills for engineers curriculum, and based on their review have actually offered participants who take 3 of the 4 modules, they credit it as 1 year, as their 1 year of Canadian experience. So it's turned out to be just a significant, carrot, for lack of a better word, for our engineers, and really just highlights the importance of that communication-based approach in our programs. Another recommended practice and another SME that we try to regularly involve is the bridging coordinator. So our programs run, the communications courses run in conjunction with that bridging coordinator. And so from the outset, from the time we're developing that curriculum, we're often involving them to engage their expertise, to negotiate curriculum content, and to develop a competency-based curriculum. So that's something Tanya is going to be talking a little bit more about towards the end of the presentation, but there is a competency-based job placement that comes at the end of our bridging program. And so what we would like to do in our communications courses is make sure they have the language they need to be successful when they are in that job placement. So we do tend to focus on that particular language and make sure it's aligned so that the program becomes very unified in its approach. With this, the topic of the presentation is a post-COVID world. And so what we have done is ensure that our curriculum, for the most part, and certainly for the engineers, is online. And that has made sure that our participants are able to access it easily, and it's available to them. When we develop this asynchronous curriculum, we call it asynchronous because it's static and online, and that's how our participants interact with it at their own convenience within a set time frame. We've applied our adult education principles. So we have discussions that help them to involve their prior knowledge and experience so they can draw on what they're bringing with them. We have teaching points to make sure that everyone's on the same page with those key points that maybe require a little bit more focus. And we give practice that has authentic real world examples. They can negotiate, they can analyze, they can evaluate to see what's effective or ineffective. And then there's an assignment where they're able to take all of that learning and demonstrate it in a simulated skills for success task that would be similar to something they would do in their profession. And then with that curriculum, this is sort of the implementation stage, we assign an EAL instructor who goes through that with a group of participants. And what they do is they take the asynchronous material that our participants are required to engage with on their own within a deadline, and then they complement what's in there. We ask that they never repeat what's in there, but that they're able to answer questions about it, obviously, but really expand on it, maybe engage in discussions to highlight cultural practices, to discuss things that our participants may have seen that they have questions about that are related to the topics, incorporate additional activities to address common areas of challenge, have extra role plays or other tasks that complement what's been done, to expand on skills, and then provide targeted feedback to our learners so that they know what they should continue to do and what they can improve on for the future. Taking it forward, we have from our post-COVID world, have two very important learnings that we are continuing to take forward as we continue to expand on our bridging programs and definitely deepen the ones that we have. And that is, number one, to be modular. So our courses, although they may be a 12-week program, we can offer them in 3 4-week modules, and that allows our learners to have easy access. They don't have to wait 12 weeks to access a program, but they can access it about once a month. And that just provides a more learner-centered approach. And it's something that our learners have consistently said how much they appreciate. And our another recommended practice, and this is something we've just been exploring recently, is that we've asked our clients and our instructors, let's assume we all go back to face-to-face service. How do you want the synchronous portion to be? And by synchronous, I've been referring, I mean, Zoom is what we tend to use. And by and large, the big response is please keep it online. We want it online because it provides us easy access. It minimizes all of the challenges that we have in taking classes, which tends to be transportation or childcare. And please allow us to have, maybe an optional meeting here or there, but please keep it online because that provides us what we need. So that's a little bit about our communications programs. And now I'm going to turn it over to Cassidy, who is going to talk about job search strategies.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, or as Tanya mentioned earlier in the presentation, sort of overall, the bridging and competency programs do have a few different components. The communications piece Sarah touched on, and then the job search piece that I'm going to talk about, and then Tanya will talk about the competency piece in just a couple moments. So included in these programs, we do offer job search strategies workshops to really focus on the job search portion of helping clients integrate into their target fields. So the job search workshops work actually quite nicely and in tandem with those communication workshops, and they are offered, pre-COVID on site, but now during the pandemic, we call them on site, but really what it is live facilitation. So a facilitator might meet with the clients enrolled in a particular cohort at the same time each day and kind of explain and have a very interactive session at the same time each day, like I said, or similar to the format Sarah described, they might have an asynchronous format online where they can actually learn at their own pace and go through modules as they wish. So these workshops would typically range from anywhere from about 3 weeks to 6 weeks in length. And again, this would depend on which particular workshop they're taking and also at the pace that they choose to work at. So in some cases, again, if they are choosing a self-guided option where they can navigate at times that work for them, it might take a little bit more or less time depending on their own commitments. What's really incredible about the workshops is that, as we've been talking about, we have the option to offer a number of different occupation-specific workshops. So for instance, rather than learning about job search strategies in general that might apply to any job seeker, we really cater the workshop or each individual workshop to the needs of that profession or to those job seekers targeting a particular field. So as we've kind of mentioned a few times already, all of the learning activities and the content developed for the job search strategies workshops are really based on the premise of skills for success. And again, these are the main skills that any employee would need to be successful in the workplace. And so we kind of use that as a foundation. And in the job search strategies piece, we also tie those skills for success to the core competencies that have been identified in any particular field. So as Tanya outlined, those core competencies are really based on what is most important for a specific field based on, for instance, a number of the people that might be involved in multi-stakeholder groups, such as employers, subject matter experts in that target profession. And those core competencies are basically agreed upon skills that are most necessary to succeed in that field. So we tie together those skills for success and core competencies by putting together a number of different interactive learning activities, as well as assignments that clients can actually think about and recognize maybe how their own experience in their home country might meet the expectations here in the Canadian labor market. So we really encourage them to think about how they've used those competencies and skills in the context of their work, perhaps in another country, but kind of thinking about how it might apply in their current context, trying to find work in Canada. In addition, we do cover a number of different topics, and again, all of them specifically catered to the field in question. So for instance, we do go into depth on topics such as resume and cover letter writing and how to specifically prepare those documents for your target job as well as target employer. We do discuss in quite a bit of depth as well how to network effectively in your target field. And as Tanya identified earlier, this can be a really major challenge that might be even more unique to newcomer job seekers, moving to a new place, a new culture, and not having a number of established connections can mean sometimes wanting to find more guidance in your field and hearing from other professionals what it's been like trying to navigate that process. So we definitely try to incorporate both professionals who have successfully found work in that field, and many of our courses have also embedded interviews and feedback from our previous clients who have gone on to be successful and find work in their field. So that's something that I think is really inspiring to a lot of clients who take the workshop and see that it works and it can be successful. We also cover interviewing and a number of different strategies for successfully showing and demonstrating those competencies in your field throughout the interview process. We, of course, have a large component on Canadian workplace culture. And as Sarah mentioned, this often involves consulting external partners and subject matter experts, whether it's about how to create a culture of inclusion and how to integrate effectively in the Canadian workplace while still, of course, maintaining your unique identity. And finally, the content in general does have a few specific principles in mind. Just like Sarah mentioned, we always are mindful of adult education principles. And with that being said, we try to include a number of diverse learning activities, whether this means visual aids, in-house videos that we have shot, different photographs that represent the clients that we are catering to. So we really try to include different learning styles as well as activities that really encourage our clients to promote themselves and feel confident marketing themselves. And finally, I like to mention that all of our material aims to be culturally relevant, meaning we do try to acknowledge and incorporate the different cultures that our clients represent. As I said, this might be just in the material itself or even in the visuals that we offer in our courses, and really with the specific aim of including a diverse range of clientele and folks represented. So that's a little bit of an overview of our job search component. And next, on to Tanya for more information on the actual competency placement piece.
I was just saying, as you can see, the road from that initial assessment done with employment specialist and developing that return to work action plan and all the different intervention, whether it's identifying language learning goals, attempting to go to the curriculum that is very occupation specific, rooted in essential skills and competencies, and working towards the opportunity to showcase those skills to employers. Competency placement is that one opportunity, one way that our clients have the opportunity to meet with the employer of their choice. Usually they have to go through the screening process just as any other job applicant and conducting interviews and so on. And because of the job search strategies workshops, we feel that they are fairly job ready and skilled and learn how to properly demonstrate those skills and answer the questions that they may be asked in interviews and be able to sort of speak to all the different themes that Canadian employer is very interested in. And we have noticed the difference that in many of countries our immigrants are coming from, there is a fairly large focus on technical competence, graduating with super high marks or placing on the exit test really highly, while maybe some of those softer skills are not as sought out. And then when you come to Canada and you kind of talk, and if you really only talk about your technical competence, there is always a question in employer's mind, well, but what about working as part of the team? What about problem solving? What about thinking and so on? So I think our clients fairly quickly through all of this process learn what employers want and how to best present all of their skills that they have. In terms of competency placement, as I said, it's a really long road to get there that is paved with the contribution of many different collaborators. We usually limit it at about 12-week placement. It's at no cost to employer, and I specifically used engineering. We have been using engineering as one of the examples of the bridging program that we have. It's probably one of our longest running, and we have seen lots of success. And many of the other bridging programs are based on this. Bridging programs are also very often run by professionals in the field themselves. So when Sarah talked about their contribution to content in these days, with COVID and the changes, and they're constantly keeping the pulse on what is happening in their profession, what the changes are happening. Lots of changes that we have seen is not just in how we interview, that most of the interviews are now conducted online, that lots of onboarding and training and orientation to the new position are done also online. Then there is so many safety procedures put in place by employer, and clients have to learn how to successfully navigate those as well. But also the fact that how clients are going through the pathway, how are they, how the exams are being delivered. So as the exams are changing and how the exams are conducted, so does the learning process, so does the practice. So what we offer as part of our bridging program has to change as well. But specifically when it comes to placements, they are still depending on the job. If you're an accountant, you may be looking at a placement that is distance working from home type of an option, or maybe blended. If you're an engineer, most chances are you will be working in the office or some blended format. But if you're looking into healthcare type of a field, then the chances are you will be going and working on site. And there is a significant amount of training on the safety procedures, the protective gear use, and so on. During this placement, it's definitely an opportunity for employer, as I said, to assess clients' competencies. These competencies have been developed for us. What is applicable for us, it's engineers of Nova Scotia. So with our trades, we have our apprenticeship agency involved, with trucking sector is involved in their professional drivers course. We have nursing association involved. So really each each occupation has its own governing body and contributors and schools and regulators that contribute to identifying those competencies. And these are the competencies that each profession has to demonstrate during the placement. What is valuable to employers is to be able to see and identify gaps for potentially their future employees. So if there are any gaps in those competencies, they can also easily develop sort of professional developing or upskilling or what additional training this particular client would need to be successful in their occupation. When it comes to engineering specifically, we have identified 7 different engineering competencies, and each of these competencies is further described. Indicators are identified, and we have managed to develop a type of a form that client would, throughout their work experience, fill out, and their immediate supervisor would put the signature, meaning, yes, I have seen this employee demonstrate this particular competence. So in terms of competence A, which means applying engineering knowledge, methods, and techniques, we look at different indicators. So you would have to define what the problem is, write about all the different analysis, solution, techniques used, and so on. And then, as I said, eventually the supervisor would put their signature to say, I have seen this competence demonstrated. These are very useful, again, for identifying gaps, but also, I don't know if you know much about engineering process or if it's standard across different provinces, but clients eventually have to write their records demonstrating a number of different projects that I have worked on, and they've follow similar path of explaining every single detail about that particular project. So this is also good practice for them to write those experience records that they will need to submit towards becoming professional engineer, achieving their final designation as a professional engineer. And through COVID, as we were changing how we teach, keeping up to date with the methods used in licensing, what employers are doing, what are the new rules and safety procedures and everything. So has our digital upskilling have changed quite a bit as well. We have been offering computer courses for a while within ISANS, but we were very focused on main sort of Microsoft Office type of softwares around Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. We also tend to sometimes revert to Google Classrooms. We collaborate using Google Docs. So we have definitely expanded some of our digital upskilling to address some of these new needs that clients are telling us more about. And I'll just wrap up conversation just to say that we do try and celebrate some of the successes, both big and small. Big successes could be maybe the ones where the numbers really tell some significant story. We can say that about 70% of our job seekers are employed in their field or related field, and that's always our goal, to support our clients towards their desired outcome. If client wants to change career, of course, that's we are able to support them to that process, but we see most of the clients would like to do what they are trained to do or what they have done in the past. Another example is in that we have had 16 long-term care program participants, and all 16 are starting with our local Northwood, which is a long-term care facility. They can't wait to have them. We know that long-term care is a bit of a crisis throughout with staffing and so on. 72% of engineers are retained by their host employers, and the rest of them really get employed very quickly after their placement because of the referral, because of the network that they were able to develop due to their placement. And some of those hard exams, such as OSCE, Most recently, 7 out of 9 IPGs have passed OSCE, which is actually quite a high success. And when it comes to qualifying 1 and 2, actually we have 100% passing rate. So that's also something to recommend. Maybe just a few small things to celebrate. For example, even clients who had to travel overseas due to some family issues and whatnot, and with 13 hours of difference, we're still regularly joining into the Zoom and completing all their assigned work. So we definitely see commitment from our clients, significant increase in digital competence for us as staff as well as our clients. And we have seen a lot of flexibility. I don't think we would have been successful as we are and quickly move, as we are closed, no, we are open, we are partially open, no, we are closed again, if that flexibility and innovation was not utilized. So we are very proud of that as well, that our service delivery continues to be a high level. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tanya, Andrea, Sarah, and Cassidy. That was a fantastic presentation. Just thinking about what you said, Tanya, about the flexibility and adaptability and where we were 2 years ago. And, I've been saying to people for the last couple of years, if we planned to put all of our programs and services online, it probably would have been a 5, maybe 10-year plan. But, we somehow miraculously managed to do it within about a 6-month window. So hats off to everybody across the country. We're actually now moving into our Q&A. I don't have any open questions. I've only got one question that was asked during the presentation, and that was, so if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box and we can address them to our panelists here. The one question we did get asked was around the employment support for temporary residents. Where does the funding come from? And that funding actually comes from our provincial government. So please, I've seen a couple of questions here. Do you have the success data for internationally trained teachers? I'm going to pass that one over to either Cassidy or Tanya.
That's a really good one. And actually, teachers, while we have multi-stakeholder working group that is working through a licensing process that is needed for teachers, we don't have a specific bridging program at the moment, something we are looking in. We still work with teachers, and Cassidy can talk about through employment counseling, any language supports need, towards working in the school board or in the school type of a system, so they kind of stay in touch with their field and with their occupation. But at the moment we don't. I'm not sure, Cassidy, over the little while, if you've seen how many teachers you have seen or what was going on, but sorry, not specifically to teachers.
Yeah, I would add this, I think you covered it pretty well. Unfortunately, we don't have a specific bridging program, so hard to measure exactly, but I know that recently we started conducting, and unfortunately don't have the results yet but we did start conducting a survey to see the success rates and how teachers are coping trying to reintegrate into their fields. In some cases, it would depend on what level they were teaching, where their place of study was, and that would kind of influence what the process would be. So there are different rates of success depending what their qualifications are, and that would also impact the process. So unfortunately, like Tanya said, we don't have statistics exactly for each case at this time, but that doesn't mean, of course, we would certainly be able to provide a lot of in-depth support for teachers, and based on your individualized case can certainly help guide you and get you through sort of the pathway that you would need to go through if you're trying to get your credential recognized.
We do have an excellent resource for teachers. It's called Teach in Nova Scotia, and you can Google that. And it was developed with ISANS and the multi-stakeholder working group, which is all the other stakeholders who are involved in education. And that's a fantastic resource. So got a couple more questions here, 3 in fact. The first one is, do you find some internationally trained immigrants relocating from Ontario to Nova Scotia in order to be able to make use of these service offerings? And if yes, what has been their success rate, and how has relocation affected other aspects of their lives? So Tanya, I'm going to throw that one at you.
Yes, actually, I have to say, I hear very often from my bridging coordinators that work with nurses, pharmacists, even some physicians. Engineering field is kind where you can actually start practicing as an engineer even before you become professional engineer. So the main reason why clients tell us why they moved is that they have found the process of becoming licensed clearer, easier, maybe faster. There are additional supports. There are financial supports that we can also offer to our clients to address paying for some of those exams through our Atlantic Immigrant Loan Fund. So I think clients are either sharing by word of mouth or finding that maybe it's easier to navigate and move to Nova Scotia for that purpose.
Thanks, Tanya. Our next question is, for smaller settlement organizations that don't have the capacity to host a large language department like you do at ISANS, what do you suggest we focus and build on? Sarah or Andrea, you want to take that one?
I'm still thinking about the question. I'm in touch with smaller organizations across the province even. We have partnerships with, for example, the VCLA, the Valley Community Language Association, and they have a very small language department. We often, again, coordinate with them and offer as much support as we can to rural clients as possible. It's a challenge for sure. I can appreciate that. And I know at past conferences that I've attended, oftentimes this is a question that comes up again and again. I don't think I have a full answer for that, but I know with the onset of so many online programs, I personally have been so happy to extend invitations to clients in rural areas for our language services. So I think partnerships between smaller organizations and a larger organization would make sense. And that's something that I'm actually seeing right now. We, at one point, had a client who was driving to Halifax from Bridgewater every week to attend the Orientation Communication Skills for Engineers program. Not an ideal situation, especially in the winter, but anyway, he was making that commitment and we were all very impressed by this. Now that element of, I guess, commute has been taken out of the equation. And I think we were speaking to earlier how that online service has allowed people from not just all across this province, but even pre-arrival to take a program that previously might not have been available to them. So I guess that's my input there. Sarah, did you have anything to add though?
No, I think partnerships is definitely the way to go. And it's certainly the way that we have built our capacity as well. So I couldn't agree more.
Great, thank you. If you had one request for your funders to make these types of intensive bridge training supports more effective for your clients, what would it be? I'm going to leave that open to anybody who wants to answer it.
The diversified funding so that we can really serve all the different type of clients. Some of our programs are unfortunately limited to only permanent residents, not even to citizens. So once you become a citizen, you may actually lose the opportunity to participate in some of the programs. So diversified funding so that we can serve all the job seekers. And then the other one is if there was any impact on the licensing requirements. One of the things that we are struggling with is, for example, in CCA or long-term care or nursing, some of those skills are quite high. They're sort of high in the academic sense of requirements to obtain your license, when in fact you may have a nurse with great skills, huge heart, very much so willing and ready to work in the field. And we know that we need it, but unfortunately cannot because is not able to reach that very high requirement in terms of language skill.
Okay, I'm going to go to, thank you, Tanya. I'm going to go to the next question, which was someone had requested, oh no, Cassidy, you've already answered that one, thank you. Someone was asking about additional financial support for PEO applicants. Tanya, you're nodding your head. That's all yours.
Yes, so Atlantic Immigrant Loan Fund, it serves the 4 provinces, and we have partners, other immigrant serving agencies in Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. that we work with. We administer the loan. It's a microloan based. So because it's loan, eventually clients will have to pay it back. It's prime +1, so very low interest rate. With that loan, employment specialists help us develop the learning plan, and then they identify exactly what the finance are needed for. So it could be to pay for specific exam, could be to purchase tools needed, could be to buy yourself some study time, so that I can focus and put my face in that book and be successful in passing it. So it could be gear tools, learning parts of the exams and so on, study materials. Lots of exams require you to be a member of QBank or some online learning platform and things like that. And then clients are obligated to repay it, start repaying it 6 months after they complete their designated path, or after they get employed and start practicing in their field, then they'll have to repay it back. So it's something that's done between us, Immigrant Serving Agency, and Royal Bank of Canada. RBC is the bank that does the administration of the funds and monitors the financial part of that.
Thank you, Tanya. The next question is, which part of the assessment or employment counseling process do you find challenging? Cassidy, Tanya?
Yeah, so which part of the assessment or the employment counseling? I would say, there are always challenges with any given case related to the profession. And I would say, honestly, the main challenge, if we're speaking specifically about regulated professions, I think is just being able to navigate the process. And although we have so many supports available, and our employment counselors and bridging coordinators are really well trained in different pathways, it can just be challenging and sometimes even discouraging because of the length of the process, and also in some cases the number of exams and different documents that need to be submitted. So although we have really extensive support available, I think part of the challenge is just being able to really get through the entire process and stay motivated and encouraged along the way. And as Tanya said, we do have a really high pass rate for a lot of the exams, but it doesn't come without a lot of extensive studying, attending group sessions, a lot of peer support. So I think it's really for regulated professionals, just that length of time and commitment in order to get through the process in some cases.
Thank you, Cassidy. Are there any updates for internationally educated nurses who are part of the population that weren't practicing or registered due to a variety of barriers to practice, but were then recruited to support the fight against COVID?
I don't know. I know I can say, and I'm sure Tanya, you know more. I think in our province, a lot of healthcare professionals, whether nurses or doctors, have certainly been part of the efforts related to vaccination processes. But from my understanding, and I may be wrong, but I know in other provinces, internationally trained registered nurses have been called to start at least with some form of practice. And I don't believe that's been entirely the case, practicing as nurses in Nova Scotia. So they have certainly in large part been responsible for a lot of volunteering efforts, as well as efforts in vaccination rollouts and other components of our response to COVID, but they haven't been able to fully practice as nurses, to my understanding.
Great, thank you, Cassidy. The next question is there any plans to add more bridging programs?
I'm pretty sure there's always going to be another one added.
Yes.
Yes. We've just added 3 in the past year, so I'm quite confident that there will be more.
Yeah.
It really is based on client needs. So as you know, and the labor market demand.
That's right.
So once those start matching up, then we start creating new programs. So keeps us on our toes. Okay, so since the launch of Skills for Success, formerly the Essential Skills Framework, has anything had to change in terms of programming or the types of supports available? And are the new skills better aligned to labor market needs in your views? Anybody want to take that one?
I can talk a little about how at least on the employment side, our programs have changed. I know Sarah and I both talked a little bit about how we've incorporated skills for success in all of our programming. So in the past, we did use the essential framework to some extent, but there has definitely been a larger emphasis on the importance of skills for success. And I would say in the context of regulated professions, we're really using it as the foundation of pretty much all of our programs in terms of developing the curriculum, whether it's communication-based or job search-based. We really use it as the foundation, and we certainly align all of the skills and learning activities so that the participants think about the skills in the context of their own work and how they align with the competencies needed in their profession. So there's definitely been much more of a push to include that in our different programs. And we do now use it as a foundation for a lot of the work related to finding jobs in particular target professions. So I would say it's definitely included more. I forget the second part exactly. Was it?
It was about whether there was anything's changed with the new skills for success.
Yeah, I know that, I don't know if anyone else wants to take a stab at that part of it. I know that they have made some slight alterations in terms of which particular ones. If I'm not mistaken, I think one of the ones that has had more of a focus in my view, because I know that was it's about our perspective, is the adaptability piece. I think with COVID, that has been a big skill and major competency for all of us, whether it's an engineer we're talking about, an internationally trained nurse, doctor, doesn't really matter. I think all of us have had more of a focus on adaptability, and recently we've had to adapt our programs as well. So thinking about how we can use adaptability in the context of our work, but also for the programs we're delivering. I feel like there's probably been a little more of an emphasis on that skill for success recently.
Yeah. And keeping up with the changes that are happening, because it seems going to be a number of years process with changing job descriptions, new assessments. So we are kind of keeping an eye on that and adapting to that as well. And some of our staff are now able to be, they are assessors, so they are trained as assessors, so they're able to use that skill as well.
Great, thank you. All right, the next question is for the competency placement. How do you choose employers? Are employers included who are more in the rural areas of Nova Scotia?
So yes, happy to answer the question, because I think we are quite proud of the fact that we always go back to meeting a client where the client is. One of the things we teach our clients is to do a very good research in labor market and to be able to identify employers. So we always ask them, so what is your top 5? Meaning, who do you see yourself working with? And to be able to do this research, each client is taught to look at, the types of projects this company organization is working on. Do they line up with the values with the employer's values? What about the culture in that work environment? And that way, when the client identifies their top 5, we are able to then take it further and help them develop networks in that area, teach them how to develop networks of their own, and we strive to make those placements. We also have a very healthy group of employer engagers, which is another unit of our within the ISANS, which are our colleagues who are working all over the Nova Scotia, whether it's rural or in HRM area, and helping us make those connections, who are speaking to employers about our services and who our clients are, the quality of the clients that we are able to send them their resumes and advocate on their behalf. So there is quite, I think, robust collaboration when it comes to anywhere from Cape Breton all the way down to Yarmouth in different types of employment and opportunities and so on. Most recently, I'll just give you an example. Cape Breton is going to quite a billions of dollars infrastructure and changes over the next few years, and some of our engineers have been happy to move to Cape Breton. They have done their placement there. They have been offered a very good, actually, project managing position and opportunity. So it just tells you that the opportunities exist if the labor market is healthy.
Thank you. All right, the next question is, do you work with a lot of partners? Is there a local immigration partnership in Halifax? And if so, have you partnered with LIP in establishing your bridging programs, and how? So yes, we do have a LIP in Halifax. It's called HIP, Halifax Immigration Partnership, and we do work closely with them. In the terms of the bridging programs, probably not quite so much, and that's because our bridging and communication programs tend to be provincial in scope, whereas the HIP is really focused on the Halifax area. So while we work closely with them in terms of other partnerships and other projects, it's not necessarily these programs. Though partners from who are on HIP may also be in our multi-stakeholder working groups. So, okay. And the next one is, does your agency work with internationally trained lawyers?
Yeah, I'll take that one. For sure, we can really serve anyone, any immigrant job seeker, and certainly internationally trained lawyers. We have the expertise on our team. I know we touched a little bit on the multi-stakeholder group, and we do sit on that. At ISANS, we have a couple representatives on the employment and bridging team who sit on the multi-stakeholder group for internationally trained lawyers. So we're always up to date on any recent changes to the occupation, the licensing process, and trends related to entering the field. So for sure, we would be happy to support any internationally trained lawyer.
Yes, it's funny you mentioned that, because there's actually a multi-stakeholder working group meeting. It's either this Thursday or the next Thursday, and I've been invited to it specifically because they have a lot of interest in a communications program for lawyers. So I'm not sure where that will go. Preliminary discussions, but yeah, there's always something exciting happening around here. So, and the last question, it's more of a comment than an actual question, but it was a reference to the Connector program, which is national in scope. And it said it would be available to IEPs to assist them with establishing professional networks. And he or she said that they would make an excellent referral partner. And yes, we do have a Connector program here in Halifax, and we do work with them. We also have our own internal mentoring program here at ISANS as well. So our first point of referral is usually to our internal program, but yes, we also use the Connector program. So, and I think that is all of the questions I can see. If anyone has another question or something that I've missed, please type it into the Q&A box very, very quickly, because we're actually over time now. So, so if there's no more questions, you can always reach out to us. It's always our first initial, our last name at isans.ca. We are very, very happy to talk about our programming with any of you at any time. So if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate in reaching out. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today, and thank you so much to Sonali for organizing this for us. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your week.